thank you very much for accepting this invitation to participate in our AC WAC 100. I would like to ask you if we can record your lecture.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of course.
AC, something I want to tell you something about AC.
Yeah.
AC is an association of architects that was born in ATAB in 2030 as a response to the decrease of teaching of architecture and this satisfaction of students with teaching methods far from reality. Since that year, AC has carried out multiple projects in different neighborhoods of Barcelona with its students, with the idea of altering teaching and collaborating with work with the inhabitants of different neighborhoods who suffer multiple problems in their buildings and homes. Developing with the students a series of small interventions that improve the quality of life of these people under the premise of working from the inside out. After workshop that we organized in April this year that we call 8,000 Houses in Your House, we have organized this workshop with a student from Barcelona, Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia on housing for elderly, comparing these topics in different cities. And at the same time, well, I want to present and welcome students and teachers. Allow me to introduce this international renowned French architect, Anne Lacaton. In my opinion, Anne is one of the best architects and educators that I have had the pleasure of meeting.
Thank you.
We collaborate with Anne in Colombia, where the idea is to build an indigenous university. Anne has graciously agreed to give us this incredible lecture today, despite the fact that she doesn't like speaking in front of a computer screen. And I would like to give a brief introduction and study in architecture in l'École nationale supérieure d'architecture et de paysage de Bordeaux. Excuse me for my French.
No, don't worry.
And after that, she studied a master in urban planning at the same school. Anne and Jean-Philippe Vassal, they have worked on numerous projects around the world. They are able to design and redesign with remarkable precision, sensitivity, kindness, attention, and modesty. Lacaton and Vassal are constantly collaborating with the community, and their intelligent designs are able to make sustainable what all already is. Since 1987, they have worked on a number of projects like the Latapi House Floriac, Post-Adolescence Day Center Beagle, Place Oak Bordeaux, Pierre Mendes University in Grenoble, House in Dodorc, and House in Contrast, Contemporary Art Museums at Palais de Tokyo in Paris in 2001, and offices in Nantes, Florida Collective Housing Buildings in 2003, and Nantes School of Architecture in 2009, transformation of the Bois Le Petre Tower, Paris in 2009, planning of brownfields of Palais de Tokyo, Paris, ongoing. They have also received the Grand Prix National de l'Architecture in 2008, the Royal School Prize in the Visual Arts in 2014, and the Enrich Ticinau Medal in 2016. And in 2018, their studio received the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture. Thank you very much, and for this kind invitation, and please accept this invitation. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm very pleased to see you again, all those I already know. It's a pleasure. Of course, it doesn't reply to see in presence, but it's already not so bad that we can continue to communicate in spite of this very, very difficult time. So I'm happy to see you all in front of me. I think I should share my screen, but I don't know what to do with, because I'm not very familiar with this. So how can I do it? To share my screen?
Yes, with the arrow at the bottom right, you have a video. Do you see a presentation now or present that? I don't know what.
Oh yes, I see. Okay.
The arrow, you place there, and the better place is choose the complete screen.
So I guess do you see?
Yes. Yes. Now you open your presentation.
But it's already open, but on another screen. So.
Because you choose the complete screen or the.
No, it's an additional screen, but I think I should.
Maybe if you minimize this one, maybe we can see the screen or not.
I think I can do it in another way. Okay, now.
Yes, it's appearing. Yes.
Now I will take full screen.
Yeah.
It's fine?
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm very pleased to present the works that we are doing together with Jean-Philippe Vassal, and especially today because of your topic of research. I selected the topic of housing, which I must say a lot of pleasure, because it's a topic which has a lot of importance in our practice. Housing is the most beautiful challenge for contemporary architecture, and yet it's also the most critical issue. Everywhere the need of housing is increasing, and most of the cities don't provide enough to fulfill the needs. So unfortunately, housing is today a factor of exclusion when it should be a fundamental right. Having a home is the most important thing for everyone. So we can say that the housing is the basic unit that makes a city. It's the unit of measurement multiplied by 10, by 100, 1,000, 1 million. And that is to say that housing is not only an issue of number, but it means that it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 up to 100, 1,000, 1 million. And it means that it requires the most careful attention to every dwelling and its inhabitants. So housing is first an issue of quality of living for all. This is what we must have in mind as architects, but also as all those who are involved in producing housing, the cities, stakeholders, everyone. as an essential aim when programming, thinking, and designing housing. So it's important to define clearly what's idea of inhabiting. Making housing is not just it's not just making a space that fulfills all the standards, the requirements, that complies with all the laws, regulation. I think it's much more than that. Inhabiting beyond the functional means freedom, comfort, generosity of space, of uses, of natural light, of view. So it's very important because the housing is a place where everyone in the world lives or should have to live. It's why for us it's an interesting care to the quality of space, and the word of pleasure of being in a space is very important, because pleasure is for the housing is a kind of is political. And for us, the reference is a reference to the villa. It's not to say that the city should have only villas like this one, just a house on the plot. But if we go beyond that, we can understand which are the qualities of living that we can find in such a place. It means openness, it means the freedom to move, it means mobility, it means appropriation, it means extra space. So all of this that for us is a good goal when we are designing housing, because it's what we would like to provide with in any situation, and including in a dense situation. So it's not a villa is not to be seen as a model, as a model in terms of object, or but as a model in terms of pleasure and quality of space for living. So, and for us, it means that it's also something that we should think with in comparison to the standards. I think everywhere we have to deal with standard for designing housing. The standards are given by cities, by governments, and if we only follow this idea of standard, it means that it's something very constraining, very restricted. And it's why we say that for us, a dwelling should be more than the minimum function, extra space, additional facilities. So, and this diagram shows, in comparison, if we have like on the left, just the minimum for living, which is just a little entrance, a corridor, and then also rooms on each side with nothing beyond the walls. Sometimes very small windows. And for us, it's important to think that a good place for housing should also have additional private spaces around. And our goal when we are designing housing would be to provide at the minimum 50% of the habitable surface, which is an extra space, which is given in addition to the standard space. And this additional space are unprogrammed. It means that it's open to the freedom and to the appropriation of the users. So it allows the mobility, the fluidity, the freedom of use. And it's why it's important that all rooms should have large doors opening to outside and not just only windows, to allow this facility of moving by inside or by outside as a house on the same level. So to do that, this extra space, but also in taking care of the cost of the economy, we use or large open structures, large span, free facade, instead of the basic way of building housing with bearing walls that determine the space, determine the openings with no possibility of flexibility of changing anything. When using these open structures, it allows to separate all the layers of the construction, and especially to separate the partitions from the structure, to separate the facade, and to make them independent from the structure, and it allows this great flexibility. So it means also adaptability, capacity of evolution, but also it means also economy, because this prefabricated system of construction allows to build larger for the same cost, because it's clear that if we talk about generosity of space, it doesn't it should not mean more expensive, because in this case it's not anymore affordable. So it's very important to have in mind this generosity of space, but in the same time to define all the conditions to make economical construction, so that it allows to afford this generosity of space. And also this way of building, of thinking the space, is also very efficient in terms of energy saving, of climate use, because it allows also to create this intermediate spaces that in any climate, any country, adapted to the climate conditions. If it's cold in northern countries, if it's hot in more middle countries, it allows also to create passive energy, passive construction, in the same time that it gives this extra space for new uses. So it's always this. We have always in mind this extra space, this facility of moving when we are designing housing. So you mentioned in the presentation this the first house that we did as young architects. It was in 1992, and our goal was really this one, to provide these people as this family had a very small budget, and they could afford a kind of standard house of 60-65 square meters. And for us, we were really obsessed by the idea of providing much more than that, because we were absolutely convinced that living in small space was not good conditions of life. So we worked very hard to design this house with this extra space. So it's a house which 180 square meters with 60 meters as an extra space, like this greenhouse, and 120 inside in the condition of habitable space, heated and so on. But this house is also really turned to the outside. That it works with climate. But also it allows in this combination between inside space, which in a way is constrained by the program of spaces like a living room, kitchen, bedrooms, and the extra space, which is free of program and which is really the place where the appropriation can happen. And in this combination between program space and unprogrammed space, it's really interesting, because something happened, which is really the freedom of the inhabitants. So, and it's amazing to see that 25 or nearly 30 years later, the inhabitants are still so happy. And recently we did a little movie there, and it was very interesting to hear what they say, that finally in 30 years, they never felt constrained by the house, and they always add new projects how to change the space and the use of the space. Another space, but here it was a very different issue. It's on a very nice plot on the seaside in the southwest of France, and the commission was to build a holiday house in this forest with many old pine trees. And for us here, it was very important to take care that after building a house, the site would not be damaged, and that after the construction, it would not be worse than before. When you see the other houses, very often they make a kind of clearing, and then they build a house. And we decided that we will keep the forest as it is, and that we will not cut any tree. And in this, it was already this this idea of how to work with an existing, how to make a do with what we have in hands. So we will see later that it has a lot of it has a lot to see also with the way how we did the Palais Tokyo, or how we did the transformation of social housing. It's just to see that it's doing something new doesn't mean that we have to change everything that we have already. So we like very much this idea of additions, superposition, taking care of all the values of the existing. And here it was a forest, but it can be also everything that we have already in hands: people, buildings, pieces of city, and so on. So the house is made with this constraint of not cutting trees. It's raised up at 4 meters above ground to keep the sand dune as it was before, and it's built with very small steel elements. So it was not needed to build with big machines or big trucks. Just pieces of construction that could be brought by 1 or 2 persons. And this is a house after the construction. You can pass below, and then you move up to enter the house. So this is the section, and you can see that we did very light, deep foundations in order to keep the ground with no digging, nothing, but just like needles, and all the stability is made in the construction and is not made inside the ground. So the house is raised up, so we can catch also the better view on the sea. And from the inside, there is a kind of a merge between the elements of the construction and the trees themselves. So another project that we did some years later after the first house, it's the first project for so-called social housing in the city of Mulhouse that we completed in 2005. I must say that social housing, social is probably not necessary to say, because housing is social in itself, and we should not have to add any categorization of anything that social housing, because in fact it's a very bad thing to introduce any kind of category, any kind of difference in typologies in the housing, elderly housing, social housing, affordable housing, more affordable housing. So, and all of this, in fact, for me is very bad, because it's the consequence is only to create more and more standards, and while in fact we should always start from how to think the space to live. And then whoever you are, if you are young people, if you are a young family, if you are old people, it's the same. You need a generosity of space. You need the space to move, and then it's it could be additional facility that is needed for elderly or needed for children, but basically the space for housing should be thought as the best place to live for everyone. So in this project, in fact, the commission was given by a social housing company for the birthday of the creation of the company, 150. And they built the company started in the middle of the 19th century by creating housing for the workers. And we started the project in 2000, and in 2000 they wanted to create a new kind of social housing. And in fact, we were free to propose anything, but the only condition was to respect the budget, because the social housing in France is subsidized by the government or by the cities, so it's public money. So there is, of course, a frame of cost that we should respect. So after the experience of former individual houses, we were in the mind to transfer in this project the same ideas as for the houses. The one, as I explained before, it was the diagrams. It means that extra space in addition to the program space, and as much as possible, minimum 50% more. But here we had the great ambition to double the program space and to make it twice bigger than the standard, of course, without changing the cost. So here, just to locate the place, because it was a project with we were 5 architects to work on this place, and here on the left, this is the worker city, which was made in the middle of the 19th century, and at the time it was a great jump in the future. But then the houses were 36 square meters, and at the time it was a big jump for the workers to have such a house. So in 2000, of course, 36 square meters was quite impossible to think, unacceptable. But this was this kind of project that helps also to re-question a lot of things in terms of how the housing is produced. So to do this, of course, we had to convince the client that it was possible to build much larger without increasing the cost. At the beginning, it was a little bit suspicious, but he had in mind that if he has asked 5 architects to do something, he had to be confident also in the architects, in the proposals. And we had a very interesting discussion at the beginning, because in fact we anticipated the fact that because it was bigger, the rent could be much higher. And we had an interesting discussion, and finally he said that it was not allowed to rent in function of the surface, but and finally he engaged that if we succeed to do the project, it will not rent in function of the surface, but in function of the type. For example, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and compared to the standard. So we worked with a very simple system of construction, because to build economically means that we have also to think what makes the cost of the construction. And of course, every element counts if we want to keep also the freedom of choosing where it's important to make the money. And in fact, it was for us, the first house, La Tapie, was a great lesson, because we really understood what makes the cost of the construction. It's not just the material, it's much more the complexity of the construction. And if you arrive to make something simple, using elements that you can find easily on the films of materials, if you understand which are the dimensions which are the most relevant, it's possible to arrive to build larger without increasing the cost. So here we have this table, which is made in in a concrete with like an open structure with just columns and the table, and on top we built 3 rows of prefabricated greenhouses, exactly the same as we can find on the countryside to grow flowers or anything like this, because for us it was important to also introduce these 2 characters of space, one quite basic and the other one with some other conditions, and also to work with a bioclimatic system which can instead of fighting against the climate and instead of isolating as we are pushed to do by the regulations here, it's a kind of opposite, is to consider that we have more to win for the climate than to lose, and that it's more efficient to work with the sun, with the wind, with the light, than to try to oppose to it. So that was the basic structure, which was built like a big loft in the most efficient conditions, and this is the final result. And then the work was how to divide this construction into 14 flats. So we had we defined some rules to divide this place, and the rule were that every dwelling should have at least 2 orientations, even opposite orientation or corner orientation, and that every dwelling should have a space on ground floor and the space on the first floor to profit of the 2 atmospheres on the ground floor and the first floor. And then we decided that every living room should have a glass facade of 5 to 6 meters, so that we could have a good light and a good connection with outside. And this was the final result. We finally arrived to build it and to respect the budget, and also the client respected his commitment to not to rent it in function of the surface. So this is just some views of the construction, and this is the situation of the empty with a large space with no partitions that give to everyone the possibility to make it its own or her own appropriation. So what you can see here is all the systems that allows to manage well the climate. Here it's solar shading, which prevents against too hot temperature in the greenhouse when it is hot. And what you see here in blue, it's thermal curtains that we place behind the glass windows for the winter time, because it keeps warm inside, but it's also the only condition to save energy and to have at the same time large glass doors, because for us it's not interesting to take the problem in the other way around, and to reduce the size of the windows, because it would be bad for the insulation. So we found some of the solutions, which are, at the time it was a little experimental, but project after project we have developed calculations, improvements, and now we have the right proofs and the right labels to do that. That is and that is counted in the regulation. So just to show this image is empty, that finally the 14 families, they received such a space, and afterwards it was amazing to see how the 14 families use it in a very different way. So one of them, after completion, it's a 4 bedrooms dwellings, duplex. The surface 187 square meters, including the winter garden, while the standard requested for 4 bedrooms was 100 square meters. The construction cost was 90,000 euros. the same cost as if we have built 100, and it was rented the same rent as the standard of 100 square meters. So it was interesting also that the client accepted that we didn't do any partition because we argumented that because it was very big, we thought that like in a loft, the space could act as dividing in a way the space. That it was possible to be isolated on one or the other part of the house without bothering anyone, and that it was not really necessary to make partitions. So the client accepted to do that because he was in this mood of experience, but he was not absolutely sure that the inhabitants would like that. And in fact, he asked us to, as well as for the four other architects, to come during 2 years after the completion, every semester, to discuss with the inhabitants and to get their feedback. And he was ready to make additional works if it was needed in any construction. And for us, for example, he was pretty sure that many inhabitants will ask for partitions. And finally, after this, during these 2 years, we came many times. We had many discussions with people. They more or less didn't complain about anything. And surprisingly, no one asked any partition to redivide the space, because all of them, they found solution with furniture or with curtains or with nothing to arrange the space inside. So for the same owner, we continued the experience, and some years later, we were invited to work in the same city, but in a different neighborhood. Here it was a more dense neighborhood in the center of the city, and we could build much higher. But the client was really involved, as also we were, to continue in the same spirit and in the same ambitions that the other project means. I mean, to develop much larger and more generous spaces. So the master plan was given, so we didn't have to work, but just to follow the forms, and it's why we have this kind of building organization. But in fact, it was an interesting discussion because at the beginning, the master plan defined typology of smaller apartments. But our client didn't want to do small apartments, and there was an interesting discussion with the mayor of the city, who allowed to be a little bit more dense, so that we could develop more surface, because it's sometimes a problem in the city that the right to build is limited, and it's a case in many cities. It means that in the plot, you have a certain amount of surface to build and not more. And it's very often a problem, because if the developer want to make more profit, he prefers to do smaller apartments. And in general, it's against the family who stay in cities and so on. But in this case, it was an interesting discussion, because the mayor accepted to increase the right of building on the plot. So, and then we developed the project with different special organization than the other one, because building with greenhouses here was not really possible, because we really wanted that at every level they could have with a garden and a larger space. And here again, the process of defining the construction system is very important. We used prefabricated, precasted slabs of 10 meters with a number which didn't need or required to make special elements, but just to use the standard elements of 1 meter point 20 by 10. So it means that for that was the size of a flat, something like 16 by 10. And it allows that in the flat there is no columns, nothing, no structure inside, and it allows to organize the space with a kind of freedom. So with this system, all the separations between the dwellings, the facade, everything is absolutely independent of the structure. So you can choose the best grid, the best dimensions, which is more connected to the elements of the construction than to the constraint of the structure. So this is the facade, the interior partitions, and then inside the typology. And here again, it was nearly twice bigger than the social housing standard of construction. So, and this is some images after the completion. The apartments on the ground floor, they have also additional little gardens. And in the upper floor, they have a balcony to compensate these little gardens. Here you can see that this is a living room, and it's 10 meters large without any walls or any columns. And all this facade, they can open widely on this winter garden. And then what you see there is the facade of the winter garden that can be open, for example, the whole summer, or can be closed whenever the inhabitant wish to do it. So this part is nearly 3 meters in front of this the glass facade. The glass facade closes the heated part. It's double glass, while this partition is much thinner because it must not be airproof to have a good exchange of air between outside and the winter garden. So some another apartment which is on the top level. Here you can see closer these thermal curtains which are made with sheep wool, and the exterior face is made with aluminium fabric. So, and winter gardens on the top level, widely openable, and this shading, which is absolutely necessary for the summer. So, and this is the principle of passive design. Crossing orientation that allows to make natural ventilation. In the summer days, the balcony, they allows to make shadow, and we never have the sun on the glass facade. The winter garden is a kind of buffer zone, and then the inhabitant can play with these 4 elements, 2 facade and 2 set of curtains to manage the comfort in summer, but also in winter. In winter, we take benefit of the sun to heat the winter garden, and in the night the curtains are closed and it keeps the warm inside. And the winter garden is much hotter than outside, and it's free, a kind of free. It's a temperature for free that is given, that gives something like 5 degrees compared to the outside. So some, and again, it was made in the budget, and the rent is calculated in function of the type and not in function of the surface. So it's very important for an architect to think also that the design of the project is not the only thing that we have to do. We have also to be aware of many some other constraints, laws, regulations which are peripheral, like for example, the right to build or the principle of taxes or all of this, which are very important because if you don't understand all of this, it can be also, it can block a project because if you don't solve all these elements at the same time that the design of the project, sometimes it's a reason that the project cannot be built because these reasons are blocking the process. So it's important as an architect to look around, to look behind, to be really curious to know what is the context of building. Because, and for us, probably it's more difficult to deal with those elements at the design and the construction itself. But it's extremely important to understand and to be curious to know all about that. So and to conclude in the new part, the part of the new construction, this is the last project that we have completed in Switzerland, in Geneva. So here it's another context, another commissions. It's we did this project after competition, and this is housing for rent, which has been built by the company of railway of Switzerland. So it's a mixed-use tower with 2 basements. The ground floor, which is more dedicated to retail. Then we have 5 levels for offices, and then we have 14 levels for housing. So here we also worked with the same principle of for the housing, to give an extra space through winter gardens. It's clear that in Switzerland the standards of housing are not as restricting than in France, because it's more it's a little bigger, but again giving an extra space, which has like a winter garden, which is in between, inside, outside, was also there a quality that we could give, and also the efficiency in terms of energy saving allows to make very open and glassed apartments. So this is the shape of the building given by the plot. So this is an office level. The columns, again, it's a system of an open system with columns and floors. And this is the one level of housing with 2 staircases, which allow to make so that no apartment has one orientation on north, but all the apartments they have a good orientation and crossing orientation when it's possible, or a corner orientation. So, and all these apartments, they have also this extra space, which is winter garden all around, plus a balcony, and that gives this nice condition with good, nice landscape around with mountains and so on. So it's clear that the quality and generosity of housing, affordability, diversity of people and ways of life are the essential conditions to make the city. And it's clear also that today it's also a problem because in many places the housing has become a financial product, which is really a bad thing, because it's in a way it's against the issue of quality of space, of generosity, and also that the fact that it's possible now for it's not really possible now for everyone to live in the city, because the city is more and more, the city centers are more and more excluding the normal people, because the cost of the housing and the scarcity of of the plots makes housing so expensive and so difficult to access. So it's clear that housing must be removed from its financial and social classifications. It's about opposing to the principle of housing as a financial project, and it's also clear that housing is so important in the everyday life of everyone that it should be supported by a strong public ambition and the strong public requirements. And even when it's built by private developers, it's clear that here and there we see that the politics has in a way abandoned any kind of requirement or strong involvement in the production of housing. So, and the second part of the lecture is still about housing, but it's much more about the transformation, because it's clear that in many cities in the world, we have this housing stock of modern housing, which was massively built in the 60s, 70s, and today there is an important issue of upgrade of these all developments, which most of them, they have not been renovated since the beginning of their constructions. And in many cities, it is a crucial question. So for us, it's important to think about the transformation, to upgrade the quality, to extend the living space, to increase pleasure and comfort, and to do more with less. So in France, it's really a special question. Here, for example, is one of the first housing, modern housing built in the suburb of Paris. And the problem in France is that since 20 years, there is a national program of renovation, which is based on the demolition of a huge amount of units, like this one. And until now, 200,000 units have been pulled down and replaced by half number of new housing for a huge cost. And 15 years ago, we decided to study this issue, because we really didn't understand why the demolition, this massive demolition, was necessary, and for us it was a big mistake. We started with this position that never demolish, never remove or replace, always add, transform, and reuse. And we studied carefully this issue, and published together with a friend, Frédéric Drouot. And we published this study named Plus in 2004 or 5, which was a kind of manifesto against demolition and in favor of transformation. And this book, this research is based on case study where we really study carefully all the aspects of this question of transformation versus demolition. And all the cases that we studied lead us to, in a way, a similar conclusion that it was always possible to transform, because these buildings, even we can really criticize how they were built at the time, how fast. All of this was built with not really a care of the quality of housing. But anyway, they are still existing. They are not at the end of the life in terms of structure, but they need to be upgraded. And for in the many cases that we study, we saw that with some operations, simple or less simple, but always feasible, it was possible to change and to improve radically the quality of housing, and to, in a way, to finish what should have been made in the 60s, 70s, but which was not made because at the time they were not really thinking about the quality of housing, but much more to do a lot of new housing in the city. So this study was not extremely successful because we were not invited to work on so many projects, but we did one in Paris, another one in the west of France, and this one in Bordeaux, which is the most recent that we completed in 2 years ago. And it's about the transformation of these 3 blocks of 530 dwellings. This is a very basic modern neighborhood that was built in very close to the city center of Bordeaux. At the time, it was not a place where people really like to go, but step by step, it has become really well deserved by the transport with enough equipment, and it's really integrated in the city center, and now it's quite a good place to be in the city. So it's clear that these large housing developments, they are really today most often rejected and considered as more as a problem than an opportunity. And it's clear that after the utopia of the new way of life in the 60s, after came the disenchantment until the period now where the situation is very critical. But anyway, this is important to see these places with positive eyes, and to see carefully which are the values there, which can be the support of a new project of transformation, instead of thinking that the demolition will solve all the problem. So in this case, the city was studying the demolition of these 3 blocks, but the problem was how to relocate so many apartments in quite a short time. And finally, they let them convinced by the director of the social housing company of the city that the transformation could be here a good solution. So we applied to the competition, and then we won the competition. So here you can see that in this city of Bordeaux, which is very flat, it's a very prominent buildings. But it's important that we should not stay in front like this, not stay far away, because to stay far away is to judge the block, to judge the facade. And from this point of view, it's very easy to say, look at this, it's very ugly, it's bad conditions, and this is better to tear down instead of transformation. So the only method to do is to go inside. And going inside, it's amazing to see that you visit as many different situations as apartments, as dwelling. So many different ways of organizing the space, of decoration, of furniture, a huge amount of collections of objects, of everything that really reflect a kind of passion, a kind of pleasure of being in a place. And this is very, very important to see all of that, and to consider that it's really, really precious, and that we have not to think any second that it could disappear, because it's a life of people, and the people, they give so much value to this situation that for many people appear as a very bad situation. So the proposal that we did was to take really care very carefully to pay attention to those situations, but in the same time to do all the improvements that were necessary to upgrade the quality of these buildings. And the first was to improve the space for living and to give additional space. So we proposed to add in front an extension of 4 meters, and then to open all the windows so that they become large doors, to open all the doors, all the rooms of the apartments to the winter garden. And this is a very small part of the long buildings. And then there were some other works inside, like renovation of electricity, of bathrooms, of elevators, fire security, and so on. All what makes a good upgrade of the quality of the building, and restart a new life for 50 years in the very good conditions of living now and later. And all of this we propose to do it in occupied site. It means that all the buildings were fully occupied with no vacancy, and we propose that all these works could be done without removing the inhabitants, so they could stay in the apartments during the work. So it's supposed to define very early the process, the method of construction to build these extensions from the outside, and how to deal with interior work so that it's possible to stay home. It was possible for the inhabitants to use during the day an empty apartment to stay when there was too much noise or too much dust or something like that. But every evening they returned to their apartment. So the process was to build first the extension with the new facade, to remove the existing doors or glass windows, to cut the parapets in order to create these large doors at the place of the windows, and to do it for all the apartments without any exception, from the ground floor to the last level. And also we use the opportunity of the flat roofs to create also additional little houses on the top. So the process of construction was this one, starting from the existing. In fact, there were two in a way, two independent construction works. The one of the extension, which was done by the outside, and the one of the interior works, which followed a different organization, but they were both going together, but with different teams and different schedules. And this is the result after the extension. So all the elements were prefabricated out of the site and just placed from the track to the facade. Before we did these foundations, columns and foundations, because this extension could not be supported by the existing construction. So it was important to make them absolutely independent in terms of structure, with foundations, columns, and so on. And they are just tightened to the existing for the wind solidarity. So, and then with two guys guiding the module, the module was placed, and then they were preparing the connection for the another floor, the columns, and then another floor, and so on and so on. And after a few floors are built, it was safe enough to start the process of changing the facade. So until now, the inhabitants inside are not really disturbed, because we are not, there is not really a connection. But at the moment we start the process of opening the facade, we stopped this kind of disturbance, and the method of with the contractor was that the replacement of the facade for an apartment should be maximum 2 days, and that was a commitment towards the inhabitants that at 99% was done. So the first day we cut the handrails, and the frame with the glass windows, they are ready, so they can bring it, and then the winter garden is nearly finished, and some little weeks later it can be opened and given to the use of the inhabitants. So the processing itself from this facade with very small windows, the process of cutting the handrails. Behind we place this light partition to prevent the dust and noise and so on, and also to make possible the life inside during the 2 days of the replacement of the facade. And then the glass windows is coming, and then the process of finishing the place of the old wall can be made later or at the same time. And from the inside, which is very important in this process for us to do this, the design from inside out means that what is important is to improve the quality of living, the quality of the space. And the first goal is not just to change the facade and to change the image of the building. So it's important to think how it will be afterwards. And from this window, now there is a large glass window opening onto this 3 meters of winter garden plus 1 meter balcony. This large sliding doors, which allows to connect, for example, the kitchen here. Before there was a little window and a window for the living room, and now both of them, they are opened onto the winter garden. So it means that when everything is open, you can change your the way you move inside the house, the dwelling. So it's quite large because most of the dwellings, they win nearly an equivalent surface or half a surface of what we had before. And the change is quite impressive, again, from the inside. Here you can see again these thermal curtains that we place behind the glass window. And again, you can see the solar curtains behind the facade of winter gardens. And inside, again, very different ways of putting the furniture. Sometimes it's full of things, sometimes it's more delicate. So everyone has his own method, his own design. But it's always surprising because it's as an architect, it could be too difficult to imagine how to deal with it. And I must say that we are always surprised by the creativity of the inhabitants. So it's important to give this chance to the inhabitants to finish something, to do their own the space, to complete something. So in the process of designing housing, but it can be the same for any project like a school, or for us it's very important to think carefully where we have to stop to design something, to over design something. So it's important to think where we have to stop to design, to let the place to the appropriation. So it's an effort always that we have to do, but it's extremely important. So from the inside, from the winter garden, many ways of dealing with the furniture and with the way of life, and with this process of designing, which is based on the improvement of the quality of housing. We arrive at the radical change of the building itself or the facade, which is not just determined by the change of a new cladding or anything like this. And for the housing on the rooftop, it's very light and simple, like case studies, again with the gardens, but with a very nice view on the city and in the sky, all in the sky. And the transformation of the blocks is also very radical. And just a few numbers to see that it's not an exceptional case, because I think in France, every existing dwelling could be transformed in that way. And it's also very important to consider that in the city, the existing should be upgraded at a very good level at the same time that the new housing is built. Because there is something really difficult to understand, that today the requirements for the new housing on sustainability, on the energy saving, on a lot of important things like that, they are very high for any new construction, but in a way the existing has not really this level of requirement. So it's important to think that at the same time that the new housing is built, the existing housing should be improved at the same level. And it's clear that it's worth it, because the cost of the transformation is not so high compared to the quality that these buildings can gain. So just a few numbers in this project in Bordeaux. 100% of the existing has been conserved. We have not demolished anything. And inside this renovation, 20% received a very heavy renovation, like the hallways, the new elevators, but also the bathrooms. And we renovated all the electricity system and improved the heating system, while 80% received only a light renovation, like painting, wall painting, or new floor. There was 53% of surface added. It means that it's an average of 50 square meters per dwelling, including the winter gardens and balconies, all usable surface. And doing this principle of winter gardens, with no insulation on the face of the winter gardens, we saved 60% of primary energy consumption, and we moved into a very good good target for the energy saving. 100 of the building was occupied during the works. It means no move of the inhabitants, no increase of rent and charges after the completion. It's public social housing, so the owner considered that it's the upgrade of the building that he needs to do to keep the building in a good state. So that was also a discussion between the inhabitants and the owner, how to deal with that. But it was also the spirit of mind of the owner not to increase the charges. There was also a process of a kind of participatory process of the inhabitants, but as a form of meetings to inform, or individual meetings where there was a specific case to solve. The cost of the transformation was 50,000 euros net per dwelling, while the demolition and rebuilding was estimated to 160,000 per dwelling. And what is very interesting is that 80% of the cost was funded by the social housing company itself, and they got just 20% of public subsidies. So it's interesting because it's we see that it could be also transferred to private ownerships, because of the value of the building, they can get a credit over 20 years that allows to do these works. So for us, it's very important to take care to these existing buildings. But also the thing is first that we have to look at them with very positive eyes, and first to see which are the values and what we need to add or to change slightly to transform into a better situation. So this kind of situation, there are plenty in the cities, and it's also our task, our role as architect to inventory all these situations, and also to reveal the qualities of this architecture and the potential of transformation that they have, and to find all the solutions to make it in a good way for the inhabitants who are living there. It's important today to consider that inhabitants are not just a number. Today they are also totally part of all the process of designing the houses. It's important to adapt also the way of thinking and the way of designing to that new situation. So I think I'm finished with my presentation, and thank you for your attention. So I think...
Thank you very much. Thank you really very much for your generosity and this magnificent conference. For everything, your projects and your attitude towards architecture is an important reference, equally for our students and for us. It's really a luck and a privilege to be able to learn the explanation of your projects and understand the possibilities and power of your proposal implied, especially for the role of the architecture. And the architecture is in relation to what is built.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have few more minutes to answer some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Students and teacher want to ask you. Thank you very much. ¿Alguno de los profesores o los estudiantes quisiera hacerle alguna pregunta a Anne? Es una suerte tenerla aquí. Y la verdad...
Yo me muero de ganas, pero me gustaría que los alumnos y las alumnas le preguntasen. I'm dying to ask you something, Anne, but I would love that the students ask you many things, and I'm sure that they want to ask you. Don't be shy. Come on.
We are fans of you, Anne. We are fans of you.
No, you must not be fan. You must just do it.
Okay. It's good. It's very good.
If you can do it, you can do it.
I have a question. Sorry, I don't have my camera on because it's broken, but I'll try to make myself understood. So all these thoughts you just shared with us, when did you learn this? I mean, were you discussing this at university when you studied, when you were younger? Like, I want to understand who taught you this, and who were the people you were beginning to settle these super cool bases we are all trying to learn with you.
And it's difficult to remember where you learn things, or because it's clear that we don't learn everything at school. I don't really remember that we learned so much that at school, because when we did the school, probably the issue of housing was not so important at the time. But probably we got a kind of I have to say that we did the studies in France after '68, which was in France a cultural revolution, and probably it gave us a feeling of freedom which is extremely strong. And that's it's clear that in a way you are not different as a person, as an architect. Both are absolutely mixed, and the spirit of freedom that we have in mind, for us, it's something that we want really to bring in architecture. And I don't know where we and we learned also a lot in because after the studies we had this opportunity to live in Africa, and it's clear that we could see something absolutely different from what we learned in Europe. So it's open to us the mind, and it's clear that probably developed to us a kind of responsibility, a feeling of responsibility that probably was something that we didn't really learn at school. But we and also the strong thoughts about, in a way, what is the sense of doing architecture? What is the sense of are we doing architecture to make beautiful objects, or just or are we doing architecture to do something helpful for the society, for everyone? And when I say that, I don't give myself a big role, or but just because it's about, very simply, what is the essential. And I think in Africa we really touch this idea of essential, not just in architecture, but in many ways, about the importance of the simplicity of relations between people, about doing something with quite nothing, or yes, the value of the existing. So probably all of this was not absolutely clear, but for us, I think we gain a kind of responsibility as person, as citizens, and as architects. And when we came back in France, and the first project we had to do was this little house. And I remember that at the time we were really obsessed by the idea of doing much better than the standard, because we were very critical with the standard, because for us it was clear that building smaller and smaller for housing was not acceptable. And we were involved in the fact that as architects we should be able to do much better than that, to bring something that this family could not expect. So that was really a strong commitment that we had in doing this house. And for us it was probably the best school that we could find in doing this house. We learned and we relearned so much.
Also have a question. Sorry, like, how do you know when the solution you make for a project is correct, is the one that would work, is the one that will live for years and will be useful for people of the future, or something like that?
It's of course very difficult, and it's what you touch is the fact that what you do is extremely serious, and that we have to make all efforts to work extremely seriously, to have a lot of rigor to do things, and I think in a way we cannot be always totally sure but also to be making architecture is also taking risk. And you take always risk in doing architecture. But the thing is that in working hard, in doing things very rigorously, you try to minimize the bad side of the risk. But it's making project is taking risk, and taking risk of ideas, taking risk of positions, taking risk of saying no. All of this is a risk, and that you have to assume, because it's a way, it's what is necessary to make architecture. And in a way, you cannot make sure that your solution is the best one, but if you work very carefully, very seriously, you can say that the part which might not work could be really, really minimized.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. I would like to know, you said before that you have to give the people possibilities to make their own spaces. So I would like to know if you have some guidelines or some boundaries that you follow to make the special spaces work.
I think precisely it's the opposite of giving guidelines. It's just to give enough generosity and enough freedom so that everything people can do works. So, but precisely the guidelines leads to the standard. So it's why it's important to open as much as possible, and to think that finally at the end, and you know that sometimes you are asked, okay, could you make something at the measure of everyone? And that it's very good for if you can know all the inhabitants of the block, that you can do something very specific for all of them. But I think in a way we think the opposite. We think that if we give very generous conditions, the people are able by themselves to do this specificity, and they can change it over the time. While if something is done so much in detail, so much at the right place, the possibility of changing is very small. So we prefer to think that, and it's for us, it's this reference to finally the best housing we can find can be spaces which have not been done for housing. A loft, a greenhouse, I don't know, an old shop, or and very often it's the most interesting places that people find to live. So the thing is how you can give this freedom to everyone, not to do the space, because the space is defined by also some construction, but to create their own imaginaries. And that for us, that is given by extra space, because I don't see what kind of imaginary you give to someone in 40 square meters with 2 windows. And so it's also the imaginary you have is also to try to escape from a place. The idea of escape is extremely important in thinking housing. So what do you see from your balcony? What do you see? And as far as you see is part of your space. And at this moment, the freedom is there.
Thank you.
If nobody asks, I would like you to first to say, underline this beautifulness of your explanation, because it mingles things which seems they are different to get together. No, for instance, being radical and at the same time not being dogmatic. And it's something that is in your architecture, both sides, or being very systemic or systematic, and at the same time very, very particular, or being very strong and hard, and being very soft. And it's kind of working with hardware and software at the same time, and it's very, very strange to see such a hard position, at the same time allowing that life comes into your house and does what it needs to do with this freedom and with this generosity. I love the idea of not having guidelines and having generosity and freedom, which is beautiful. And I'm completely excited with your always that I listen to you. It's always very, very exciting. But something that I would like to ask you, and maybe more related or getting insight of things that the students are working now with, which is the idea of elderly people, and how do you think or imagine your houses being habitated with the people that at the same time are getting old, and their life is getting their world is getting smaller, because the difficulties of accessibility, the difficulty of the memory, the difficulty of the places that they can go, and the things that they can gather. So their life are getting smaller, and maybe the need of space also changes. And I would like to ask you, how do you think of your houses being habitated with people that are getting older, and how this flexibility that definitely is being attempted in your projects, how this is related with the idea of getting old?
I think it's a very specific issue, but I would say that the spaces that we are creating, they make no problem for anyone, and including for old people, because everything is at the same level. You can go to the balcony without steps. The kitchen are big enough, the bathroom are big enough. So there is no problem in terms of mobility, accessibility. So, and I think that for me, the problem today for the elderly is much more that the society have to create specific houses for them, and specific houses where they are all together, while probably it would be a great thing to maintain people in normal housing, and to develop much more the service to the persons, because it's really dramatical to go to these elderly places. I don't talk about the people who really need a lot of care because they have specific disease like Alzheimer or something like that. But most of the people, their last place is these specific houses, because they cannot stay in their dwelling, because they cannot. There is certain things that they cannot do alone. And for me, the society would be more clever, more intelligent if we develop much more services to these people, but keep them in the normal dwellings, in the middle of the others. And with the transformation in the Bordeaux, because in this building there are many people who were there from the beginning. So today they have 80, 85, and most of them, they are still there, and they don't want to move until they can do it. But the problem is not the problem of the housing itself. It's much more the problem that how do we care from the people who are not like the others. And for me, I would say that if I don't see really it's little exceptions, but I don't see why we should think very specific housing for elderly. If you do a housing where it's easy to move, where you have a place to go out because they cannot move too much in the city, but where they can stand on the balcony or winter garden and to look at what the others are doing. If there are still neighbors that they can hear that they are going to the work, or children, or probably it's much more, it's much better than being all together in a place which many times becomes very, very medical. And today with the COVID, we see that it's more and more difficult to visit these places. So I would say that for me, but of course it's a kind of spontaneous answer to your question, because I was not in situation right now to work specifically on that question. But my feeling is that if the dwellings are well done, and well done not only for these people but for everyone, with a lot of facilities, of generosity to move, with no problem for a wheelchair, of everything, I don't see any problem that the old people stay as long as possible in the normal housing.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask one question. How do you think this COVID-19 situation will change the way we design, or we create architecture, or we teach architecture, or we do housing all around the world?
I know that it's the permanent question today since March. Everywhere, okay, the COVID will change the way to do housing, but for me, it's only those who didn't want to see the problems before will just touch the point today, because it's revealed, in fact, that most of the people, they have bad housing. And I don't talk about poor people. I talk about many people, you, me, because in the cities, the housing is very bad in general. It's too small, too expensive. And at the moment, we need to stay more at home, to work at home, sometimes to do the school at home, to listen concert at home. We finally observe that that we need space, but it's not new. Before it was the same, and I hope that this what have been revealed by the COVID will bring those who decide to build housing, the architects who are building housing, to change their mind. But they could have done it before. It's not an argument. It's not an excuse to do or not to do. Before, we could have the same observation that housing was not good for other reasons than COVID. So it's clear that I hope that it's not just a kind of opportunity now, but that it will really change something too. But it's not, for me, it should not change for the COVID reasons. It should change to give finally good housing to everyone, COVID or not.
Hi, I'm Raúl. I'm here in Tijuana, Baja California, in Mexico, and I just want first to thank you for your presentation, and secondly, because I truly love the idea of your generosity, of this idea of freedom, and I don't know, you call it open mind. It's open spaces, open mind, open, I don't know, open systems, and I love it. And I love also the follow-up that you do over time, how you continue and you revisit these buildings that become homes when they become home, right? And especially when you show us the Bordeaux project, and this tend to, and I guess it's just a little follow-up into what Joseph already asked, in which is, and is there in your journeys back to homes any situation beyond what you show in Bordeaux in which there is elements of integration, if you will, between generation, between elderly people, young people, kids, mom, dads, you know, but especially between elderly people and I don't know, other ages, right? Something that you have seen along your journey backs, which I absolutely adore in your presentation. And that's it. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to ask a very specific question. Thank you for your presentation, first of all. And I wanted to ask if there is a reason why you usually use steel structures in your projects, and if you are planning to work with other materials.
I don't think that we are using only steel structure, because sometimes we use also concrete, or we could use also wood if it's. I think the only, in fact, the decision for the materials is to use a material which is the most relevant for what we want to do. So the steel structure sometimes is very interesting because it's built fast. It's light compared to the concrete. For example, in the renovation, and for example, we did the renovation of a little tower in Paris, and the weight of the construction was an important issue, because on one side of the tower we could not put a crane, and the crane should work in a kind of blind situation on the other side. So we used the steel construction because it's allowed to do a quite light construction. While sometimes the concrete is interesting because it's compared to the steel for high construction. For example, you solve also the problem of the fire resistance. So for us, the material is to use the one which is the most accurate for what we need to do. For example, to make a large transparent glass windows, it's clear that the glass of polycarbonate is the most relevant. So we use that for the facade. So I think its material is not extremely important in itself. The thing which is important is to take care to the amount of material that you are using. So in the way we build, it's always we use a few materials always. We really insist with the engineers that they calculate only what we need and not more. And we try to work with to build with no need of materials that recover. So because it's not they don't last very long. So what is important is not today. It's clear that, for example, the wood appears as a very virtuous construction system, but with it's really it's not always the case, because it depends where it comes from. It depends how high you are building. It depends, and it's much more expensive than anyone. So it's what is important is to use the material with a lot of parsimony, and to study really what is the most relevant material for what you want to do.
Thank you so much.
Carlos, I think your micro is mute.
Well, thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta más para Anne. La verdad ha sido muy generosa Anne con su conferencia, su tiempo, y hemos aprendido mucho. Total que, thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, and I hope to see you somewhere soon. use that, Carlos, somewhere?
Maybe in Putumayo.
Oh, Putumayo is far away, and I've still in mind the hike that we did in the forest, and I'm still exhausted of it. But it was a very good experience, and you know that we are very close to print the book.
Yeah.
And you will receive it very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. And now I will really go home in a hurry, because you know that in France we should be at home at 9.
In Spain is at 10. So
okay, so you are lucky. You have another hour. Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank